Hello and welcome to My Bolt EUV. This is Jim and we're going from point A to point B. Climb in, let's go. In today's episode, we're going to talk about and debunk the top 6 myths about battery electric vehicles. So stick around, here we go. I want to share an axiom that is one of the best I've ever heard and is the foundation for this episode. Doubt will travel clean around the world while the truth is still pulling its boots on. Doubt is easy to manufacture, it's easy to spread, but it's difficult to retract when it's been released into the public arena. When doubt is spread, it's like cutting open a feather pillow and shaking the feathers into the air and then daring to pick them up again and put them in a new pillow. It's almost impossible. So what is the best way to counter doubt? Doubt can only be countered with repeated doses of truth, and that is what we will do today. Keep this video bookmarked. Show it to your doubt-filled friends. And I'll bet $5 to a donut that 99.99% of the people you show it to, when presented with the truth, will recognize it. But that 1 in a million person will try to challenge what's being said here. To which I say, go ahead. I welcome the attempts. Today, we're going to look at the top 6 myths. In previous videos broaching similar subjects, I've had commenters call me a liar, a Kool-Aid drinker, a bought and paid for EV promoter, and many 4-letter words that I will not utter here. And using those 4-letter words like that only prove that you have a small IQ, nothing else. I deal in destroying doubt, and if that upsets you, all I ask is that you move along to another location. You will not sway me from the path of truth with your doubt. So the 6 myths that we're going to cover today are: number 1, electric vehicles use more fossil fuels than gasoline cars because they're coal-powered. Number 2, electric vehicles use more carbon in their lifetime than gasoline cars because it takes more carbon to build them. Number 3, they are heavier and take farther to stop than regular cars, making them more dangerous on the highway. This also means they produce more brake dust and leave more rubber on the road than gasoline cars. Number 4, they weigh more than gasoline cars and therefore they're destroying the roads and bridges at a higher rate. Number 5, they pay less taxes overall than the owners of gasoline cars. Number 6, the battery electric vehicle is more likely to catch fire than the internal combustion engine vehicle. So we're going to take all 6 of these, as we have done in past videos, and go into a little bit of detail on all of them. So let's take the first myth. Electric cars use more fossil fuels than gasoline cars because they're coal-powered. We calculate emissions from electricity generation with the EPA's E-Grid emission factors based on 2021 data that was published in 2023. And that uses the U.S. average electricity sources for emissions, and that comes out to 0.857 pounds of CO2 per kilowatt hour. A gallon of gasoline produces 19.6 pounds of carbon. Now let's break this down into real numbers for cars that have put on 100,000 miles. The internal combustion engine car at 30 miles per gallon will use 3,333.33 gallons at 19.6 pounds of carbon per gallon, giving them 65,333.33 pounds of carbon over 100,000 miles. The battery electric vehicle at 3.9 miles per kilowatt hour will use 25,641 kilowatt hours at 0.857 pounds per kilowatt hour, and that is only 21,974.34 pounds. The battery electric vehicle at 2 miles per kilowatt, like the Ford F-150 Lightning, will use 50,000 kilowatts at 0.857 pounds per kilowatt hour, or 42,850 pounds of carbon. Meanwhile, all this assumes the average U.S. mix of fossil fuels are the fuels in general that make electricity. There are 2 things that significantly reduce the numbers for a battery electric vehicle. Number 1, a good majority of battery electric vehicle owners charge from their own personal solar panels. That's 0 pounds of carbon per kilowatt hour. And then more than 70% of all battery electric vehicle charging takes place in the off-peak hours, which means they are charging from carbon that's already being used to keep the grid online. So that's also net zero. The next bit of doubt is battery electric vehicles use more energy to make them than regular cars, internal combustion engine cars, and therefore their total lifetime carbon emissions are higher than those of internal combustion engine cars. So I want to talk about a car at 100,000 miles, which is more than half the life of your average internal combustion engine car, but only a third of the life of a battery electric vehicle. Let's look at the numbers. I will say this with all the seriousness that I can muster, that only an imbecile would think that an ICE vehicle uses less carbon over its lifetime than a battery electric vehicle. But here are the numbers. To manufacture a compact ICE vehicle, 16,000 pounds of carbon are used. To manufacture a medium-sized battery electric vehicle, 25,000 pounds of carbon are consumed. And to manufacture a large battery electric vehicle like a SUV or pickup truck, 36,000 pounds of carbon are used. But when we look at 250,000 miles, that is assuming the ICE vehicle can make it that far, the ICE vehicle will be at 16,000 pounds for manufacturing, 163,333.25 pounds for the fuel it's used, for a total of 179,333 pounds of carbon in 250,000 miles. The battery electric vehicle, car or SUV, will only be at 79,935 pounds of carbon, and even the large Ford F-150 Rivian RS1 type vehicle will only be at 143,125 pounds of carbon. So you're talking about a big SUV that uses less carbon over its lifetime than the smallest 30 mile per gallon compact internal combustion engine car you can put up against it. So let's consider that myth is done. Battery electric vehicles are heavier and take farther to stop than ICE cars, making them more dangerous on the highway. This means they also produce more brake dust and leave more rubber on the road than gasoline cars. All I have to say is that is wrong in both assumptions. Since electric vehicles use regenerative braking 90% of the time, they actually use less brake pad and create less brake dust than the equivalent gasoline car. Also, they can stop in shorter distances because they have a dual braking system, which means in reality, they use less rubber in bringing a vehicle to a stop. But just for giggles, let's look at about 5 categories here. For the compact car SUV, the number 1 stopping distance is from a Bolt EV, 118 feet. Nothing else even comes close. For the small car SUV, not compact, small, again, the Bolt EUV in that category stops at 119 feet, the best in that category. For the mid-sized car, coming in number 1 is the Tesla at 119 feet, Tesla Model 3. And then the mid-sized SUV, the Tesla Model Y at 118 feet. And then we move into the bigger pickup truck category. The Ford F-150 Lightning stops in the same distance as a Nissan Titan, and it does so using less brake pad and less rubber on the road. So that myth is out the door. When something's only partially true or half true, it's still a lie. And here we are at myth number 4. Battery electric vehicles weigh more than gasoline cars, and therefore they're destroying roads and bridges at a higher rate. And there's a partial truth there. Yes, they weigh more than other vehicles in their class, but as an example, the Bolt EUV is only 400 pounds heavier than the Chevrolet Trailblazer. But the Bolt EUV itself is lighter than the gasoline-powered Blazer by 400 pounds. So saying that all electric cars weigh more than the other cars on the road is just showing how moronic the fossil fuel industry thinks you and I are. In their desperation, they have filled the information space with half-truths and pure false information. The bottom line is, battery electric vehicles weigh in the typical ranges of all cars on the road. They are not twice as heavy as your typical car, as has been intimated by the fossil fuel consortiums. They do not tear up the roads and bridges due to their extreme weights. Virtually everything you hear about the weight of a battery electric vehicle is a pure lie that's been put out by the fossil fuel industries. Myth number 5. Battery electric vehicle owners pay less taxes overall than the owners of internal combustion engine cars. Well, let's look at 3 things here. First of all, battery electric vehicles cost more than gasoline cars, so right off the bat, the sales taxes are higher. Then the ad valorem taxes are based on either the value of the car or the weight of the car, depending on your state. And since the value of battery electric vehicles hold out longer than and weigh slightly more than their ICE counterparts, they pay more taxes over the lifetime of the car, period. So in summary, battery electric vehicle equals more taxes at purchase, more ad valorem taxes for the life of the car, and more taxes over the lifetime of the vehicle because they last longer, period. So now many states are imposing an extra tax on battery electric vehicles to make up for what they consider lost revenue, not considering that they're getting taxes elsewhere from electric companies and DC fast charge companies and level 2 fast charge companies that are charging customers and taxing customers for services outside of their own home. And my guess is this is going to be challenged in our court systems over the coming years because people like me are going to get fed up with being taxed to death by federal and state and local officials who have no clue what they're talking about. Let me break down the taxes like this. For those who charge at home, they pay additional state taxes and federal taxes on the additional energy they consume. For those who charge on the road at DC fast charge and L2 chargers, they pay state sales tax and other similar taxes on the transaction with the charging companies. Because battery electric vehicles does weigh 250 to 400 pounds more than other cars in their class, they pay more ad valorem taxes in states where weight is used to compute the tax. And because they hold their value better and longer, they pay more ad valorem tax over time in states where their value is used to compute the tax. And because the battery electric vehicle does cost more upfront, between $2,500 and $10,000 more in that class, they pay more sales tax. So why should we pay an additional road tax each year based on the perception that because we don't pay gas taxes, we must not be paying our fair share? Talk about a huge misconception. Now we come to one of my favorite myths. The battery electric vehicle is more likely to catch on fire than an internal combustion engine vehicle. And let me say this, even if you add in all Chevrolet Bolt EV spontaneous fires that erupted in 2021 and 2022, the chance of a Bolt catching fire is still small compared to the hybrid and ICE vehicle. Here are the numbers. There are 3,475 fires per 100,000 vehicles sold for hybrids. There are 1,530 fires per 100,000 vehicles sold for internal combustion engine vehicles. But there are only 25 per 100,000 vehicles sold for battery electric vehicles. There have been almost 202,000 units of the Bolt EV, Bolt EUV, and the European equivalent, the Opel Ampera E, sold around the world. And there have only been 25 confirmed fires. So doing the math, that's only 12.5 fires per 100,000 Bolts sold. That's lower than battery electric vehicles in general. That's pretty good if you ask me. So carrying this battery electric vehicle being the worst in the world and being villainized in the media, let's ask this question. Let's say you're on a plane and that plane is crashing and you have 3 parachutes to choose from. They are labeled hybrid, internal combustion engine, or battery electric vehicle. Which one do you choose based on the numbers that we just went over? I'll bet that 99.9999% of the viewers here would choose the battery electric vehicle parachute because it has less of a chance of failure. Only a pure idiot would choose the hybrid or ICE parachute. But to be fair, I want to address the real issue that makes the headlines. It is hard, very hard, to put out a battery electric vehicle fire because they suffer from something called thermal runaway in the battery when the battery actually catches fire. There are ways to stop the thermal runaway, and fire departments are learning how to do that through better and more accurate cooling of the fire. Thermal runaway means the fire is creating its own oxygen and can only be controlled or stopped by cooling the material to less than the point of where the thermal runaway can sustain itself. This is an ongoing process. But this is not just a battery electric vehicle problem. It also applies to hybrids because they have batteries. Smaller, yes, but they're still there and still subject to the same thermal runaway, and they've been around a whole lot longer than battery electric vehicles. Also remember that battery chemistry is changing. There are newer and less unstable versions of batteries, like those the lithium iron phosphate or LFP batteries, that have less of a chance of thermal runaway. The nickel, manganese, cobalt batteries that are in most electric vehicles today are the worst type for thermal runaway problems. So as we get ready to close here, let's talk about carbon and the spread of doubt. The big oil, big coal, big gas, fossil fuels consortiums and their lobbyist groups, specifically the American Petroleum Institute, the Independent Petroleum Association of America, the American Fuel and Petrochemical Manufacturers, and the National Tank Truck Carriers would have you believe the following, which they actually used to testify before Congress, that an Audi A7 Quattro at 90,000 miles will have used 49 tons of carbon, and the Tesla Model S at 90,000 miles will have used 44 tons of carbon, with a difference of only 5 tons of carbon. Meanwhile, back in reality, the A7 Quattro at 90,000 miles does use 49 tons of carbon, but the Tesla Model S at 90,000 miles will only use 12.1 tons of carbon at 3.2 miles per kilowatt hour. That difference is not 5 tons, it's 36.9 tons. So you can see that this doubt is being spread in our halls of Congress, it's being spread in our media, it's being spread around the world by these big fossil fuel consortiums and their lobby groups. And it's time for this to stop. Write your congressman, write your senator. You can even write the president, I don't care. But write everybody that is involved in this process to help them understand why the information they're being fed by these lobbying groups is misinformation. It is not the truth. And the only way our society can operate safely and effectively is for it to operate on the truth, not doubt. Again, I just want to thank you for stopping by and taking time to listen to this. Bookmark it, use it, share it with as many people as you want to share it with. It's time for the truth about battery electric vehicles to spread like wildfire. Do remember to subscribe, share, comment, and like, and ring the notification bell if you want to know when something new has been uploaded. Also remember, as I've always said in the closing of my videos, treat everyone with kindness. Put a smile on your face, help someone today, and pay it forward when someone does the same to you. Thanks again for stopping by, and take a look at a couple of these other videos that I've put in the closing credits here. See you soon, or somewhere along the route from point A to point B. Later.